Now that conference play has started, we wanted to go into how the mindset and the strategy side of the game changes for pitchers when they have to face the same team 3 days in a row. So in preseason, you're playing 5 games a weekend, usually different teams every single game. And so when you're strategizing, you're really just strategizing for one game and maybe facing a hitter 3 or 4 times rather than 6 to 9 times, depending on how many innings you're throwing in a weekend. And it really does change how you approach everything.
I think one of the challenges with preseason too is, you are playing so many different teams. So you are spending a lot more time on film and looking at a bunch of hitters. So in terms of like preseason scouting, I feel like it takes longer. But now that you're, playing against the same team, facing the same hitters, you kind of get to go more in depth when it comes to scouting.
In preseason, because you're facing so many hitters, you only have so much time to really study each of them, but it's the same for them. So they don't study you as much as a pitcher. So you can really just like, okay, I know that she likes this and like this seems to be her weakness, but this is my strength. And so you can just kind of like go at it that way. It doesn't need to be as detailed of a game plan, and you don't need to strategize for so many at bats, right? Because the more a hitter faces a pitcher, the more they figure the pitcher out, and the hitter or the pitcher loses the big advantage they have the first time they see a hitter.
So in terms of, that mental shift going into conference play, right? Obviously, you're going to be facing the same hitters, but also there's times where even beyond conference and postseason, like you could be playing them again. So from here on out, like I like to think of Texas where there'd be times where we would play them like 6 times in a season. So it's like when you get to the last game, you're like, you already know what I have and you know what I throw. And it can feel that way in a weekend too. Like a 3-game series, it can feel the same way. By Sunday's game, you're like, man, they know what I have. Or even later, like freshman versus senior, when you've been playing for 4 years, there's a lot of film on you. So there's a shift in like your mentality, but also how you prep, your game strategy. Sometimes you have to like reverse scout and look at yourself and see what are other teams looking at when they see me. It's like I'm looking at my heat map. I'm looking at what pitches I throw in certain counts because all that information is out there. Sometimes you kind of have to like not like turn into a new pitcher, but kind of another version of yourself. There'd be games where I would use my changeup a lot. And maybe later in the weekend or later on in the season when we were playing the same teams over and over again, teams would know that I was going to throw a changeup often. It's like, okay, I'm holding that off until like the 3rd inning, like the second time around, or like holding a pitch off is something that I would like to do, or even like rise ball, where it's like if I'm staying mostly down and they know that I usually go up, it's kind of like thrown off a little bit, right? And then it comes back into play. So that's like, I guess one strategy is taking a pitch out for a little bit and then kind of slowly switching the game. Or once they start to catch on to it, right, then you flip it.
That was actually like one of my favorite things about pitching. I didn't really start to think this way until I got to the pro league, because we would play 4-game series and there were 4 teams in our league. So it was brutal for pitchers.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that and honestly, it made it so much more fun to me, is there were certain hitters in the league that were just so good that I would literally sit down with my catcher. We would game plan. Like, okay, so I knew my rise ball was going to be sharpest early in the game, especially after all my wrist surgeries, and it was going to die off later. Plus, later in the game is more important to keep the ball in the park because you have less chances to make up those runs. And so my game plan oftentimes would be to start up, and everybody knew me for my rise. Like that was kind of always what I was known for. And so a lot of hitters would be like sitting on that pitch for me. And so I would set them up early in the game. I'd throw them up and in, and like really hammer that, so that later in the game, when maybe it was a close game or, something like that, where I needed to make sure that the ball stayed in the park and I wanted to have them think that I was going to go up and in again so they could sit that pitch. Now I'm going down and away with a curveball, off-speed drop, or something like that, just to completely switch it up. So I'm getting them to think like, oh, hey, I'm going to give this pitch to them later in the game. And then I would change it and just kind of, it was like my way of playing chess. And then sometimes like in the 3rd time through the order, I would completely change it up, but I would always be talking with my catcher. Back then our catchers called the games. So like that was my pitch caller. And so it was just between us. Now I would include my pitch caller in that conversation as well. Here's what I see, here's what I feel. I feel like this hitter is trying to sit this pitch, or, like, hey, we wanted to set her up for this pitch, but it's just not really working. So let's go to this game plan. You don't have to just sit on 2 pitches, but you can take certain pitches out. You can use them differently. But the whole idea is like try and set hitters up late in the game to think they're going to get a certain pitch, or where they're looking for a certain pitch and then they don't get it.
And this is what successful programs are practicing in the fall and in preseason. It's not something, because there is that mental shift, but also as a pitcher, you have to be confident and comfortable with throwing maybe pitches that you like, throwing pitches in different counts that you're not used to. And obviously you don't want to just get thrown out there and have to do that. So practicing pitching being uncomfortable or pitching not like how you're used to, all of that.
Yeah, and that's an important skill to have, not just for conference play when you're seeing the same hitters 3 days in a row, but like you're going to have days where your best stuff isn't working. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to adjust and pivot and throw other pitches in different counts and use them differently than you're used to. And back to the shifting to conference play, like it is a very different mental approach. It's not just a single game approach. Like, okay, here's how I'm going to attack these hitters for this game. It's okay. Here's the plan is to attack the hitters this way on game 1. And then this pitcher is going to throw game 2. And so she kind of does this. So then here's maybe what I want to try and do game 3.
You work with the whole staff. If you have one, right? You work, and it's very strategically planned out with like who's going to be throwing game 1, game 2, game 3, etc. Right? Who's coming in when, who's going to start, who's going to finish. Like all of that is planned out. Like a whole other side to softball that you don't think about.
Those who know, but it doesn't get talked about much. And seriously, it's like, this is when it gets fun. Plus, it's just more challenging.
Obviously, it's more competitive. Your record starts to matter a little bit more. You know, obviously, once you get into conference play, games are more fun when it means something. When you are playing for something that means something a little bit more, right? Naturally, you kind of level up a little bit mentally.
And then you go through that entire shift again when you get to postseason.
At OU, we would describe it as like different chapters where it's like, okay, preseason done, moving on. Now we're in conference. Okay, once that's done, boom, postseason. It's like they're like, it's a whole different book. Like we're starting from the beginning because everyone, it's like a reset for everybody.
A lot of it is so different for me because we didn't have staffs. Like my senior year, I was pretty much the only pitcher. So I threw in every game except for 7, and we played 50 some games. Like I threw a lot. I threw too much. There were plenty of weekends where in conference where I would start all 3 games. And
that's
like
so
somehow I still had a good year. And I don't know how, because it's not like the Pac-10 then was like the SEC is now. It was the powerhouse. And so I don't know how I did it, throwing 3 games in a weekend to the same hitters with the same pitches. And, you know, and that was before I really had this like idea about strategizing from game 1 to game 3, or even from inning 1 to inning 7. I was just out there throwing, and we always talk about 9 versus 1. And for the vast majority of people that works. For me, it was like, no, it's me and the hitter. Like I'm taking you down. Like you don't have a chance. Like that's where I needed to be to throw my best. And that's kind of what I went with.
Nice. Adapt or die.
Pretty much.
And that's also, another mental shift. Like knowing your role comes into play. You were throwing every game. Whereas me, it's like I had a certain role. So it's like mentally, it's like, okay, in practice, my thought process during season is getting really good at my role, right? Or like being able to come in and shut an inning down or, whatever. So it's like you're practicing for what your role is. And obviously that can change from preseason to conference play to postseason. All of those can look, for some people, dramatically different. So everyone's prepping in different ways. And I think that's something that softball fans or people that watch and enjoy watching softball don't think about.
Yeah. And, fortunately, I got to experience that in the pro league, again, because we just played the same 3 teams over and over and over again for 40 games or something like that. It was very brutal. We played 4-game series. And so every pitcher had to do every role. And even now, you don't really have designated starters or designated relievers. I think the game is shifting more towards that now. But back then, like you had to be able to do it all. The mental prep and even like the physical prep changed for me if I was starting or if I was in relief. So I had my whole routine that I would do if I started, and then I would do part of the routine if I was in relief. But then it was much more, I was watching the game, and then when I would go mix, it would be like, okay, here's the situation, here's the hitters coming up. How do we want to attack them? And so now I'm going through the next 3 at bats in the bullpen, pretending like I'm in the game with these specific hitters that are coming up next. Because if I have to go in now, I want to know exactly what's going on. I want to have my plan, and I want to feel like I've already done it. back to the whole idea of being in conference, it's a totally different game planning style. It's much more long-term. And like you said, you're also potentially keeping in mind postseason as you're doing your strategic planning just for this 3-game series. I also think it's where it gets really fun. This is when it becomes chess, and this is when you get to pitch and not just throw. If you want an inside scoop on any other parts of pitching, let us know, because we're really excited to share those.